Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be continuing to read Dream Days by Kenneth Grahame. So let's get going. Selina, to be sure, had a sneaking fondness for dressing up and paying calls, though she pretended to dislike it, just to keep on the soft side of public opinion. So I thought it extremely mean in her to have the earache on that particular afternoon when Aunt Eliza ordered the pony carriage and went on the warpath. I was ordered also in the same breath as the pony carriage, and as we eventually trundled off, it seemed to me that the utter waste of that afternoon, for which I had planned so much, could never be made up nor atoned for in all the tremendous stretch of years that still lay before me. The house that we were bound for on this occasion was a big house, a generic title applied by us to the class of residents that had a long carriage drive through rhododendrons and a portico propped by flute pillars, and a grave butler who bolted back swing doors and came down steps and pretended to have entirely forgotten his familiar intercourse with you at less serious moments, and a big hall where no boots or shoes or upper garments were allowed to lie about frankly and easily, as with us, and where finally people were apt to sit about dressed up as if they were going on to a party. The lady who received us was effusive to Aunt Eliza and hollowly gracious to me. In 10 seconds they had their heads together and were hard at it talking clothes. I was left high and dry on a straight-backed chair, longing to kick the legs of it, yet not daring. For a time I was content to stare. There was lots to stare at, high and low and around. Then the inevitable fidgets came on, and scratching one's legs mitigated slightly, but did not entirely disperse them. My 2 warders were still deep in clothes. I slipped off my chair and edged cautiously around the room, exploring, examining, recording. Many strange, fine things lay along my route. Pictures and gimcracks on the walls. Trinkets and globular old watches and snuff boxes on the tables. And I took good care to finger everything within reach thoroughly and conscientiously. Some articles in addition I smelt. Sorry. At last in my orbit I happened on an open door, half concealed by the folds of a curtain. I glanced carefully around. They were still deep in clothes, both talking together, and I slipped through. This was altogether a more sensible sort of room that I had got into, for the walls were honestly upholstered with books, though these for the most part glimmered provokingly through the glass doors of their tall cases. I read their titles longingly, breathing on every accessible pane of glass, for I dared not attempt to open the doors, with the enemy encamped so near. In the window, though, on a high sort of desk, there lay, all by itself, a most promising-looking book, gorgeously bound. I raised the leaves by one corner, and like scent from a potpourri jar, there floated out a brief vision of blues and reds, telling of pictures, and pictures all highly coloured. Here was the right sort of thing at last, and my afternoon would not be entirely wasted. I inclined an ear to the door by which I had entered. Like the brimming tide of a full-fed river, the grand, eternal, inexhaustible clothes problem bubbled and eddied and surged along. It seemed safe enough. I slid the book off its desk with some difficulty, for it was very fine and large, and staggered with it to the hearthrug, the only fit and proper place for books of quality such as this. They were excellent hearthrugs in that house, soft and wide, with the thickest of pile, and one's knees sank into them most comfortably. When I got the book open, there was a difficulty at first in making the great stiff pages lie down. Most fortunately, the coal scuttle was actually at my elbow, and it was easy to find a big flat bit of coal to lay on the refractory page. Oh no. Really, it was just as if everything had been arranged for me. This was not such a bad sort of house after all. The beginnings of the thing were gay borders, scrolls and strapwork, and diapered backgrounds. A maze of colour with small misshapen figures clambering cheerily up and down everywhere. But first I eagerly scanned what text there was in the middle, in order to get a hint of what it was all about. Of course, I was not going to waste any time in reading. A clue, a signboard, a fingerpost was all I required. To my dismay and disgust, it was all in a stupid foreign language. Really, the perversity of some people made one at times almost despair of the whole race. However, the pictures remained. Pictures never lied, never shuffled nor evaded, and as for the story, I could invent it myself. Over the page I went, shifting the bit of coal to a new position, and as the scheme of the picture disengaged itself from out the medley of colour that met my delighted eyes, first there was a warm sense of familiarity, then a dawning recognition, and then, oh then, along with blissful certainty came the imperious need to clasp my stomach with both hands, in order to repress the shout of rapture that struggled to escape. It was my own little city. I knew it well enough. I recognized it at once, though I had never been quite so near it before. Here was the familiar gateway to the left, that strange, slender tower with its grim square head shot far above the walls. To the right, outside the town, the hill, as of old, broke steeply down to the sea. But today everything was bigger and fresher and clearer. The walls seemed newly hewn. Gay carpets were hung out over them. Fair ladies and long-haired children peeped and crowded on the battlements. Better still, the portcullis was up. I could even catch a glimpse of the sunlit square within, and a dainty company was trooping through the gate on horseback, 2 and 2. Their horses in trappings that swept the ground were gay as themselves, and they were the gayest crew for dress and bearing I had ever yet beheld. It could mean nothing else but a wedding, I thought, this holiday attire, this festival and solemn entry, and wedding or whatever it was, I meant to be there. This time I would not be balked by any grim portcullis. This time I would slip in with the rest of the crowd, find out just what my little town was like within those exasperating walls that had so long confronted me, and, moreover, have my share of the fun that was evidently going on inside. Confident yet breathless with expectation, I turned the page. Joy! At last I was in it. At last I was on the right side of those provoking walls, and, needless to say, I looked about me with much curiosity. A public place, clearly, though not such as I was used to. The houses at the back stood on a sort of colonnade, beneath which the people jostled and crowded. The upper stories were all painted with wonderful pictures. Above the straight line of the roofs of the deep blue of a cloudless sky stretched from side to side. Lords and ladies thronged the foreground, while on a dais in the centre, a gallant gentleman just alighted off his horse, stooped to the fingers of a girl as bravely dressed out as Selina's Lady Between the Saints, and round about stood venerable personages, robed in the most variegated clothing. There were boys, too, in plenty, with tiny red caps on their thick hair, and their shirts had bunched up and worked out at the waist, just as my own did so often, after chasing anybody. And each boy of them wore an odd pair of stockings, one blue and the other red. This system of attire went straight to my heart. I had tried the same thing so often, and had met with so much discouragement, and here at last was my justification, painted deliberately in a grown-up book. I looked about for my saint friends, the armour man and the other fellow, but they were not to be seen. Evidently they were unable to get off duty, even for a wedding, and still stood on guard in that green meadow down below. I was disappointed, too, that not an angel was visible. One or two of them surely could easily have been spared for an hour, to run up and see the show, and they would have been thoroughly at home here, in the midst of all the colour and the movement and the fun. And with that we come to the end of the episode. Quite nicely, actually, for a change. Oh, excuse me. Oh, bit of a yawn. Oh. Pardon me. So, I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.